Hey everybody, welcome back to Baking with Rosehill Sourdough. This is Mike, and today I'm going to be going over my signature Rosehill sourdough pizza dough. This recipe is going to yield 4 220 gram or 10-inch pizzas, and you're going to start off with 315 grams of warm water, followed by 12 grams of salt. You're going to mix in 12 grams of olive oil. You're going to mix that all together, kind of swirling the water until the salt dissolves and the olive oil breaks up. And after that, we're going to add 50 grams of our culture. We're going to break that up and stir that in until the water becomes a little bit milky in color. And then we're going to add our flour. This is 500 grams of unbleached bread flour. So at this point, all we're going to do is mix up this dough. We're not trying to knead it or anything. We're not trying to make a smooth dough ball. All we're doing right now is just incorporating the flour, the water, the salt, and the olive oil, and a little bit of sourdough culture that we put in there. We're just trying to make sure there's no clumps of dry flour left. So all we're going to do is use our silicone scraper or silicone spatula to mix all the dough together. There's going to get to a point where it might be a little bit too difficult to use the silicone spatula. At that point, I set it aside and I start to work the dough with my hands. This is not a very sticky dough, pretty easy to work with. If it does start sticking to your hands, you can try to flour your hands a little bit or try to wet your hands, but don't try to add more flour into the dough if it is sticky. If it's too sticky, just drop it, walk away, and come back in 15 minutes and try it again. Right now, all I'm trying to do again is just incorporate all the flour, and I'm flipping the dough over and over and just mixing it with my hands to make sure that all the flour is incorporated. All right, now I'm just going to check my dough temperature. I want this to be somewhere between 70 degrees and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It looks like I'm reading 77 degrees, which is perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and cover the dough. It's going to be done with a lid or a wet towel. I'm going to set a timer for 1 hour. I'm going to take the dough away and put it in a warm part of my house. Typically, this is right above my refrigerator, just somewhere warm to help maintain that dough temperature, again, between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so it's been an hour. I'm going to grab my dough. I'm just going to reach in here with dry hands. I'm going to gently fold this dough over. All I'm doing right now is creating a smooth side and a seam side to the dough. So I'm gently pitching one of the edges, and I'm pulling it over to the center of the dough, and then turning a little bit, grabbing the next edge, pinching it, pulling it, and folding it over. This is called a stretch and fold. All I'm doing is going around the dough until I get what starts to resemble a ball. At that point, I'm going to lift the dough up, and I'm going to fold it back onto itself, and I'm going to do that a few times, kind of grabbing, pulling over the top, pressing it down to create a tight ball, and then lifting it back out of the bowl again. Each time I'm rotating it a quarter turn just to make a little bit of an oval, and then pull up and then back over on itself, doing the folds. And all that's doing is creating, again, a seam side of my dough and a smooth side of my dough. Not trying to, again, knead this or anything right now. This is just a simple fold just to start to help build some structure in the dough. Now once that's complete, I'm going to cover it again with a lid or a wet towel. I'm going to set a timer again for an hour, put it in a warm part of my house, come back. All right, so it's been an hour. Now all we're going to do is start to build some tension in our dough. So I'm going to take the dough out, gently remove it from the bowl. If it's stuck a little bit, don't worry. Just work your way around the bowl, simply tucking the edges up underneath. All we're doing by building tension is continuing to build that seam side and smooth side of our dough. So every time you tuck, you want to tuck up into the seam side of the dough, and you want to stretch the top smooth side of your dough. What you're doing right now is building tension in the dough. And that tension is going to do is trap the CO2 that's being created by fermentation in the dough, and it's not going to have any place to get out, because we're going to have a nice tight dough with lots of tension, nice smooth top. It's going to trap all that CO2 in there. There's a few different techniques for this. You can do it in the bowl, you can do it out of the bowl. This is the technique that I like. Basically, I'm just moving the dough around in my hands, forcing the edges up into the center of the dough. So I'm just creating a nice smooth ball, smooth top, and a nice seam on the bottom. When I'm done, pop it back in my bowl. I'm going to cover it up. Set another timer for an hour. I'm going to set it in a warm spot in my house. All right, so it's been an hour, and now we are on our last shaping. This is all it is when you're handling the dough. There's no kneading in this process, in this recipe. It's just gently shaping the dough 3 times to build some structure and to build some tension, and to let the dough naturally ferment and rise. It's going to make you some really nice, airy sourdough pizza crusts. So right here, all I'm doing is giving this dough a final shape. You can use your hands or a dough blade just to build some more tension in that outer skin on a nice dough ball that's nice and smooth. Has a smooth side on the top and a seam side on the bottom. That's all we're looking for here. So when that's done, I'm just going to take the dough ball, drop it back into our container. At this point, you want to put a lid on it or a wet towel, set a timer for an hour, put it back in that warm place in your house. Now, when you're done with that hour, You're going to put it directly into the refrigerator and let it sit. Recommend at least 24 hours. I find the best dough is actually about 72 hours in the refrigerator. Now, if you're really wanting to make dough right away, that's fine. You can go right into the balling process right now. Now the dough's coming out of the fridge. It's been in there for, say, a day up to 5 days. Now you've got it out of the fridge. And you're going to do this balling process 4 hours before you want to make pizza. All you have to do is take the dough out of the container onto your board. And we're going to divide the dough up into 4 even portions. And those portions should weigh just about 220 grams. That 220 gram dough ball will make roughly a 10-inch pizza. 220 grams, perfect. So I'm just going to move my scale out of the way, grab these dough balls. I'm going to teach you a few different balling techniques. This is my go-to technique here. Simply pinching and pushing dough into the center of the dough ball, rolling it, and then using just the edges of your hands to form a dough. Again, with that smooth top and seamed underside, the exact same smooth side and seam side that you made when you were making your dough before. Second technique here is just holding it in your hands, another go-to technique of mine, kind of wrapping the dough around your index finger of your left hand while you pull the dough down around your finger. And then every time you just rotate it 90 degrees, wrap around your finger, pull your finger out, rotate it, wrap it around, do it again. And then just use the edges of your hands to form a smooth ball. Again, seam side down, smooth side up. Third technique here is doing basically the exact same thing as the first technique, but with a dough scraper. A lot of people prefer to use a dough scraper instead of their hands. That's fine. This is a technique that I generally don't typically use, but I find that a lot of people handling dough for the first time really appreciate the ability to use a dough scraper instead of their hands if they're finding the dough a little bit sticky. I'm just going to shape this with my hands here and put it off to the side. Our last technique is really similar to the first technique. It's just folding the dough in to form a little ball. But then you're going to wrap the dough around and then press down and pull back towards yourself to make a seam. So push the dough over, press it down, then using pressure, gentle pressure, pull the dough back towards you to create a seam on the bottom. Again, smooth side up, seam side down. And there we go. We've got our 4 dough balls. And I'm going to take a couple of these dough balls and make some pizza. So cover the dough balls up, let them sit for 4 hours, and then come back to them and we'll make some pizza. All right, so I'm just going to move these dough balls out of the way and just be able to focus on one at a time here. All right, so here's a really simple shaping technique. As I work my dough ball into the middle of my board here, I'm just going to take some flour and lightly dust both sides of the dough. Again, remember that seam side and smooth side. When I make pizza, I like to keep the seam side up and the smooth side down. I find that I have less issues getting it off the peel that way. It's a simple technique of just pressing air to the edges of the dough just to start to make a little disc. Then you just lift the dough up, gently stretch it between your fingertips, basically just pinching the dough and rotating it around a circle. It's called the steering wheel. As you rotate it around, it'll start to form a nice round circle. And then you want to pull it back up, put it on the backs of your hands, and gently pull away from your hands, and then just do a little bit of a spin. I'll kind of show you what that looks like here if I put the dough down. You just want to be gently pulling away and then spinning. Pull away and then spin. I'm going to pick this up and do that again. Just really gentle pressure, no fingertips through the dough. You're not going to make any holes in the dough doing it this way, just simply with the backs of your hands. All right, this is getting pretty close to the 10-inch size. I'm going to give it one last final stretch here, and I'll go ahead and measure. I'm just about at the 10-inch size. Let's just double check. Perfect. All right, so at this point, I'm going to bring in a wooden pizza peel. I prefer to build my pizzas on wood and then retrieve on metal. So here I've got a wooden pizza peel. I'm just going to sprinkle that with a little bit of flour. This is going to be a really simple pizza. I'm just going to put some red sauce. Remember, on these pizzas, less is more. You don't want a whole lot of toppings. So easy way to get your pizza to stick to your peel. So I'm just going to hit this with a little bit of salt and pepper and then come in with some shredded mozzarella. All right, so I went and baked this in my Uni pizza oven, my Uni Pro on wood. And you can tell here, nice charring, and look at the crust, all this puff in the crust. This comes from that fermentation, that nice base that's gonna come from that nice hot stone. But I'm gonna do a second method here also, so I'm gonna show you how to make a pizza in your home oven. If you don't have a wood-fired pizza oven at home, like an Uni Pro, you can go ahead and make it in your home oven as well, and I'm gonna show you the difference. So I'm gonna start, again, just a little bit of sprinkling of flour and one of those dough balls that we made earlier. And I'm gonna shape it in the exact same way that I shaped the one before. I made sure to preheat my home oven to as hot as it will go. This oven that I have here goes up to about 450 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty typical for most home ovens. You might find some that get up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really not that hot compared to wood-fired ovens, but it's hot as we can get. So this technique is going to help when you're making pizza in those style ovens. So we've got our pizza here, and what I'm going to do is take a piece of parchment paper, and I'm going to put that piece of parchment paper onto my pizza peel. Now, if you don't have a pizza peel, that's fine. You can build this directly on your parchment paper. What I find is that people that have issue getting pizza off of peels and into ovens, especially home ovens, onto a pizza stone in your home oven, sometimes just using the parchment paper by itself is enough. You don't need the pizza peel, especially if you don't own a pizza peel. So parchment paper is the easiest way to go. This is a super simple pizza. I'm going to start it off with a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to do this method that I call a pre-bake. Basically, I'm just going to spread a thin layer of olive oil onto my pizza dough, and I'm going to bake the pizza for just 3 minutes. It's going to come out of the oven like this. I'm going to leave the pizza on the parchment paper, and I'm going to start to top it. This is going to be really similar to that last pizza I made, because I want to show you the difference in baking in a wood-fired pizza oven versus baking in your home oven. So I've just got a little bit of red sauce here. I'm going to throw on some shredded mozzarella. I'm going to put this back in the oven, and I'm going to slide it out onto the pizza stone on the parchment paper, but I'm going to take the parchment paper out. I'm going to let that bake for 12 minutes, and this is what it looks like. So compare that to the wood-fired pizza that we had before. If you look at the pizza, it looks dried out, and it really just is. Baking at that lower temperature just really doesn't give the crust enough heat to really puff up. So you're left with this kind of dry crust. Don't get me wrong, this is still really good pizza, and it's great dough. But do you see the difference between using a wood-fired oven and a traditional oven? So that's everything. That is Rosehill Sourdough's pizza dough. Thanks for stopping by. If this video was helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. If you'd like any more of my recipes or tips and tricks, please follow me on Instagram @Rosehill Sourdough. Talk again soon.